Hello and welcome to the program. Today we're talking about the development of Ukraine's railway system. In 2018, Ukraine's state railways operator transported 55.9 million passengers and increased its traffic by 4 million people compared to 2017. Now, to talk more about other achievements and challenges of Ukrainian railways, we welcome to the studio today Volodymyr Shulmeister, head of the program called Infrastructure of the Future at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. Hello and thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
So, your institute conducted a research of the main challenges for railway transports for 2019. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, I started to work for the institute 2 years ago, and one of the first things I put as an objective for my part of the institute is to focus on the problems of railway and to see what's happening with the railway and what's going wrong with the railway system and what should be done to increase the chances of the railway system to develop further successfully. The matter is that Ukraine is, as a country, has quite a specific situation. Ukraine in size is number 44 in the world, and in length of the railway, it's number 12. So we have quite intense system of railway in Ukraine. It's historically happened from Soviet Union time. And till now, we have quite unique position in the world in volume of cargoes being transported by railway. It's about 70%. So 70% of all cargoes in Ukraine is being transported by railway. Compared to Europe, in Europe you have about 20%. And 70% in Europe, it's being transported by trucks. Here in Ukraine, we have 70% being transported by railway. As for the passengers, we have also quite a high share of railway transport passengers. You mentioned 56 million passengers. It's about 50% of all passengers in Ukraine are being transported by railway. So the role, the position of this system of transportation in Ukraine is quite unique and
crucial.
Therefore, as soon as we see any problems in Ukrzaliznytsia, which is a state-owned company, it was changed now to a joint stock company, but still it's in the hands of the state. It's very important what's happening with it, and we can feel immediately whether it goes well or not. The business can feel it because 70% is being transported by of the cargoes, and we as passengers we can feel it as well. Therefore, as mentioned 2 years ago, I put the target to focus on railway. In the meantime, we did several researches, including air transportation, development of new airports in Ukraine, river transportation. And now, luckily, we have finished this big work. This is the document.
So the conclusion of this work, like, does railway need a modernization?
Absolutely.
Does it mean to be updated now?
The main issue with the main problem with the railway at the moment is that for many years, let's say 25 years, in Ukraine, we have huge debt of the state to modernize railway. Unfortunately, it was used by many stakeholders, like oligarchs or politicians, to achieve their targets. But as a cost of it, we have now huge debt in front of railway system to invest in. At our institute, we calculated how much should be invested to keep the railway operational. And we figured out that we need about $3 billion per year in order to keep it in a good state, in a good shape. Yes. We have at the moment about 90% full system, including wagons, locomotives, and rails are amortized. So huge amount of money should be invested. For this purpose, there should be some conditions created to attract investments in railway. And for this purpose, first of all, there should be some legislative measures should be taken, like, for instance, acceptance of the law, which is waiting already 4 years. And what I've heard today, the Institute made presentation of this research. And there was also a deputy from the government, from the parliament, and he told that within 2 weeks approximately this law will be in the parliament for voting.
So there are steps being
This is
put in
one of the
place.
steps that should be done, exactly. In the meantime, Ukrainian Railway, they do their steps as well to make situation better. For instance, they switch now to, before that they were buying fuel in very strange tenders. Now they switched to formula tenders, which are being used in the world, which is good, and this can save about, I think, $20–30 million per year to Ukrzaliznytsia, and it obviously needs money for investments. We calculated, for instance, at the moment the infrastructure of Ukrzaliznytsia is about 40% of infrastructure, I mean rails, needs to be repaired, 40%, and this is quite high amount.
Now, for this infrastructure to be fixed, as you said, Ukrzaliznytsia needs money. How to and where to get this money? Is there some sort of agreement, some sort of attracting investors, of course, and will the price rise for passengers also, for the daily life?
Four possibilities. First is that, and we're looking at the world, at the experience of other countries, and I can say that normally the state might be one of the investors in this situation, because this is a strategic company. It's one of the 10th biggest companies in Ukraine, with about 270,000 employees. And the state, and we can see it also in some other countries, might be an investor in these kind of companies. Unfortunately, Ukraine as a state has now huge problems itself, so it's not an option.
It's not the priority of
Absolutely not. Second option is to work on the effectiveness of the railway system itself, and huge amount of work can be done there and should be done. And this depends on the management of Ukrzaliznytsia, and we today during the presentation and in this book as well, actually it's now available online on the site of Ukrainian Institute for the Future. There are some measures that should be taken to increase effectiveness of the railway system itself. Way number 3 is to increase prices, as you mentioned, also for the tickets. If you compare traveling in Europe and traveling in Ukraine, if you go from Kiev to Lviv, for instance, you pay about $17 or $18, and you sit in the train, and it's a very nice train, which you can compare with European quality train. If you do the same in Europe, you would pay 5 times more, at least. This shows that, unfortunately, passengers...
but the cost of life in Ukraine is not the same exactly.
But we're talking about costs. Exploitation of railway system costs money, and they should come from somewhere. It doesn't matter whether cost of living is high or low. You should pay for services, for gas, to pay wages. Okay, wages here are lower than in Europe. Here we have advantage still, but probably not for long. But for the rest, there is cost price, and we cannot, as a company, it should not be operating under the cost price. This was way number 3, which I mentioned. Rising the prices of tickets, and should be done despite of political influences, which are also quite extensive in this company. And way number 4, which is also quite prominent and has future, is increasing private sector inside of Ukrzaliznytsia. It can be done through, and is already done through, allowing a private sector on the wagons market. There are now private wagons which are approximately the same level as Ukrzaliznytsia wagons. And to allow also locomotives to be private on the rails in Ukraine. Unfortunately, this is one of the changes that should be introduced by the law, which I mentioned. So hopefully, if the parliament will vote for this law, this will also attract investments in Ukraine. If you compare...
So the idea would be to switch to a privatization, basically, of
not privatization, no, this is a mistake. I'm talking about certain parts of Ukrzaliznytsia in these parts, there should be private investors should be attracted. And we're talking also about non-core business, which is also quite extensive. I think if Ukrzaliznytsia sells its non-core business, it can also get quite an amount to be invested in other important things like infrastructure, wagons, and locomotives. So huge number of aspects should be taken into account. We put this in very nice work. We made some prognosis of the economic development of Ukraine. This is, and we calculated what should be done depending on the way Ukraine develops. So we put correlation between development of Ukraine in the future till 2030 and what should be done with railway if Ukraine goes one another or third way in development. Unfortunately, at the moment, Ukraine develops in a quite low rate of growing. It should be much higher. We have about 2–3% GDP growth. And in our view, at the Institute, we assume that if the changes go in the right way, Ukraine should develop GDP growth of about 8% rate at least.
So to conclude this interview, would you say that it's a promising sector for Ukraine in general?
Ukraine should do at most all the possible to save railway system, especially in the view that Ukraine now has 70% of share in cargo transportation on rails. And now if you analyze what is happening in Europe and in Asian countries, they look now also on the railway system because they consider it as more ecological than aviation and then transportation by trucks. So they invest more in this system. We have already a huge system we should only maintain. And we are actually ahead of Europe because we have already 70%, but we are losing it from year to year. So hopefully also our work that I present now will make some input in the Ukrainian way to sustainable growth of Ukrainian railways. And I hope this will open some new pages in the history of Ukrainian railways as well.
Well, thank you for this overview. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today. That was Volodymyr Shulmeister, head of the program called Infrastructure of the Future at the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. Thank you for watching the program and stay tuned for the rest.